this 6x6 vehicle can be bought from Banggood for around about 160 bucks. I've been busy doing a few modifications to it, like four-wheel steering on the rear there. And we've also got an automated 2-speed box, which can also be controlled from the transmitter, just like the one on the Traxxas TRX6. So let me take you inside, show you around the mods I've done to the truck, including 2 new raceway servos, 25 kilo one at the front, 20 kilo one at the rear, and then we're going to come outside for a quick play around and see just how good the P601 mods prove to be, or not, as the case may be. But it could do with some new tyres, I'll tell you that from the outset. Well, I've been busy working on my P601 6x6 crawler, made a few mods to it, including a 4-wheel steering, and this has actually got a 2-speed gearbox on it anyway, which you can manually switch between low and high gear with a little lever inside. However, I've gone and bought the optional little micro servo fitted to it, so I can now change between low and high speed gears from the transmitter, just like you can do with the Traxxas TRX6. Speaking of which, this P601 6x6 crawler is yours for around about $160 versus the Traxxas TRX6, which I love by the way, but that is well over $600. Now I will say from the outset, this is not obviously going to be to quite the same quality as the Traxxas is, 4 times the price, but for just 25% of the value of the Traxxas, you get an awful lot of car for your money, and it's very, very easy and very cheap to modify. So I'm going to get the camera down and show you exactly what mods I've done and talk through the cost of them, and then we're going to take it outside and have a quick practical demonstration. Now first up, you notice on the top of the car I've got 2 Raystar boxes. That's because we've got a new Raystar 25 kilo steering servo at the front. Now, incorporating into the P601 build, we've got a Raystar 25 kilo servo from Banggood, digital, metal geared, waterproof, 300-degree turning radius on the thing. Outstanding, yours for a smidgen under $14. Links to them below the video. Got a 20 kilo one fitted on the back, but more on that in a second. And the front steering servo at 25 kilos is pretty good, 300-degree range on the thing. Digital metal geared servo, yours for $13.99, so I'll put a link to it below the video. And we've got a Raystar 20 kilo steering servo at the rear. And the 20 kilo one just has 120-degree turning radius on it, but that should be enough for most of us, but a bargain, $11.99. And no, if you order 2 or more, you get 10% off. I believe that's on both of these servos. Anyway, back to the crawl. Let me take the body off and show you just what I've done to do that 4-wheel steer conversion. Well, at the front, as I mentioned, I've got new 25 kilo Raystar servo. At the rear, a 20 kilo Raystar servo on there. So what other mods have I made to the car? Well, I've wired this in to a separate channel on the receiver, so there's no way splitter cable, so the front wheels don't turn at the same time as the rear ones. They're independently controlled. Now it does have some advantages out on the trail, as you'll see later on in this video. Now, I have replaced the original plastic chassis rails. The whole thing was plastic on here. I've replaced them with the metal rails on either side of the car on here, and that's added quite a bit of stiffness to the car. I've upgraded the motor. I fitted a 20-turn axial one that I had spare, as the original one did overget a little bit too warm when I was running it through on 3S. Speaking of which, this stock ESC is rated up to 3S and does run quite comfortably on this motor, and quite some speed with this 20-turn axial motor fitted to it. Also, if you're familiar with this truck, I've upgraded the shock absorbers, done the rear fork on there, still got the original shocks on the front, but changing around to these little bargain numbers that I bought from eBay has made the world of difference to the handling. Out the front, you will notice at the minute I'm not running a front bumper. I'm working on a mod in order to lift that front bumper up a little bit higher so I can get a bit better approach angle at the front on there. But one of the biggest mods I've made to the truck is the addition of this little servo here, which connects to a tiny little lever down there, which switches between the high and the low speed on the car. And switching between the high and the low speed gear on the car can now easily be done from the transmitter. Simple as that in order to change gear. So we can change to and from the low and the high speed gears at the flick of a dial on the transmitter, just like the Traxxas TRX6 does. Now, other mods I've made to the car in order to get the four-wheel steering. I fitted a new metal bracket to the back of the car here. This replicates the one that I fitted at the front. The original is plastic, but as I was replacing the front one, it struck me to do four-wheel steering conversion and buy another steering servo bracket for the rear of the car. I simply then bought another front axle which fits on the rear of the car and replicated the steering on there. So it was quite a nice, easy conversion, relatively cheap to do as well. The parts for this truck are not overly expensive. I'll put links to everything that I've bought below the video. As for the steering on the rear there, you will notice the tyres are slightly offset at the minute. That's because the rears can steer independently of the front using this little dial on top of the transmitter. What's the advantage to that, Richie? Well, if you're side hill and you go along a steep side hill and the back of your truck is maybe pulling down, particularly with a longer wheelbase truck like this, you can angle the tyres at the rear uphill, so you can almost go like a crab along, and the rear is wanting to almost climb up the hill. So rather than dropping down, you can actually angle the back of the truck in and go straight along the hill without any drop off when you're side hilling. So that is the advantage that being able to adjust the steering at the rear is. Saw somebody doing this down at JJ Customs, talked through it with them, and they managed to convince me not to fit a Y cable but to do the independent rear steer. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below the video. Anyway, enough talking, Richie. Let's take it outside for a quick test. Just remember, guys, if you like what you see today, don't forget to subscribe. Well, time for a quick demonstration of the practical mods I've done to the P601. First of all, that rear wheel steering is actually independent from the front wheels using this little dial on here. I saw somebody when I was down at JJ Customs and they had got a four-wheel steer setup on their car and they were running it independently rather than through a Y splitter cable where you have the front wheels doing the opposite to the back wheels, and they explained there was quite a bit of advantage when you're out on the trail doing that. And in addition, using this other dial on it, I control the 2-speed gearbox between high and low. So we're dialing that down, we'll change gear on there. And fly along. So I can now change gear on the fly using this dial on the top. Anyway, with low gear engaged, let's see how we get on. Now we've got the front bumper off for the minute, for various reasons. And should make fairly short work of that. He says then we immediately get stuck. The one thing I would say on this truck, the tyres do have a tendency to let it down, but I'm not going to hide stuff from you on here. The tyres are probably going to be my next upgrade on here, but the motor has got bags of torque on here, side climbing ability. Yes, fingers crossed we don't turn over. Get good on that. Let's go find something a little bit more testing, and I've just a thing in mind. Now, will we get up the trickiest obstacle in my garden? I have a feeling the tyres may let it down. Now we're not going to get up this, I can tell you right now, I've been practiced a couple of times off camera. Now with the 2-speed box on here, definite improvement at low speed crawling, he says. We shall see how we get on. It's where the tyres desperately let the truck down. That is definitely going to be the next thing I change on here, because they are actually a very low profile. Well, a 2.2 diameter on here. The rim is much bigger than a traditional like 2.2 on there, so the tyre is a lower profile, so they've not got a big sidewall, so there's no grab to the tyres. Well, I did mention being able to turn the rear tyres separate from the front has its advantages, and when you're side hilling and the rear end of the car with the weight is maybe wanting to drift down the hill, well, you can put a bit of turn on up the hill, so that when we go along here, the rear end is actually wanting to steer up the hill. Maybe put a little bit too much on there, but hopefully that will demonstrate it on there. So instead of dropping down, the rear end of the car is actually pulling slightly up the hill, and therefore, particularly on this looser stuff, it's not wanting to drop down the hill as much. Hopefully you can see that in action there. Whereas on the loose stuff, this would traditionally be falling towards me on there, that back end under power. It's helping keep the car from slipping sideways down the slope. So that was one of the advantages that was explained to me. You just need to keep pausing every now and again to straighten it back up, of course. The mods, particularly the shocks, seem to have made a definite difference to the car, but I am thinking
I should have upgraded the tyres, because they're definitely letting the tyres are letting it down today. The stronger steering servos, the raceway steering servos, seem to be proving particularly competent on them. Still working on improving the steering on the car. Now, if you need to make a sharper turn, of course you can turn the wheels away like that, and the thing will virtually turn on the spot, spread back down the other way. Particularly when it's going slowly on the trail, when being able to steer that rear on its own is an advantage. You can also just go straight forwards and the rear of the car is going to pull itself around. Just something a little bit different, and as I say, the mods on this car have not cost an awful lot to do at all. A little bit of steering on the back end there to keep it heading up the slope and stop it slipping down, because traditionally my truck will want to roll down this hill on here, because the back end will want to drift. Oh, Richie, you're going to catch that. Nope, really good. Took the sends pretty well, but the steering is much improved since the addition of those new Supercheap 20 and 25 kilo servos from Banggood. Now, if you want to turn the thing on the spot, it says, get some angle on it now. I'm going to return much tighter radius, I think, than my TRX6 would be able to do. Now the tyres are really letting it down today. That's what's really letting it down today, on this loose wet stuff. Well, the suspension a bit more sorted. These tree roots no longer prove any issue for it at all. Indeed, they're not troubling it at all now. Change your tyres and we should be flying along.
Well, I hope you like that overview of my mods and that quick test run around the yard. The P601 crawler from Banggood, yours for around about $160. Is it worth a punt? The mods that I've done to it are very cheap to do indeed. So I do feel it's got a little more to come in there as yet. I'm interested to see what it is like with a different set of tyres on it, because the tyres are letting it down badly at the minute. Now I fitted these two race style steering servos, both front and rear. The wheels aren't really getting kicked around at all, particularly the front one, 25 kilos. This really is holding its line very strongly indeed. But you've got options there. But for $160, but with just a few bucks more thrown at it, you can remotely change between the high and the low speed gearbox from your transmitter, just like you can do on the $600 plus Traxxas TRX6. So this gives you options. This is not going to be up to the same quality as it, but it's a darn good starting point to my mind, particularly if you fit the Banggood parts to it, which are relatively low cost, as you'll see from the list of them in the link below this video. Anyway, a little bit more to come from this car. The next thing I am going to be doing is changing the tyres, because that is the thing that badly lets it down at the minute. Also, I want to get some weight low down in the car. If anyone has any suggestions as to how to do that, have your say in the comments section below the video. Anyway, thanks for watching. Well, thumbs up if you like this video, guys. Post any comments you might have in the comment section below the video, and hit the circle below to subscribe. And if you do hit the circle, don't forget to hit the bell.